The air conditioning died at 8:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I wiped sweat from my forehead, grateful for the quiet after another 14-hour day debugging our defense contract systems. My fingers kept moving across the keyboard, tightening security protocols that nobody understood, but everybody depended on. Then I heard voices drifting through the thin wall of the executive conference room. My name is Raymond Mitchell. I'm 48 years old, and I'd been Chief Technology Officer at Apex Defense Solutions for 20 years. 20 years building their digital infrastructure from nothing. 20 years of military discipline applied to corporate systems. What I heard next would change everything. "He's getting too expensive," came the voice of Bryce Hamilton, our 35-year-old CEO who'd never worn a uniform in his life. Third time, this quarter, Raymond's flagged those pension fund transfers. Kids getting too close to the actual numbers. I froze. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. They were talking about me. "Ray built this entire system," replied Marcus Wade, our CFO. His voice carried that particular smugness of someone who'd never had to work for anything. "But he doesn't need to know what's happening behind the curtain." "Agreed," Hamilton continued. "Terminate him Friday. Effective immediately." My stomach dropped. 20 years. 20 years of nights and weekends, of building something from scratch while these guys played golf and bought vacation homes with money that wasn't theirs. Can you imagine his face? That was Gerald Stone, HR director. That military Boy Scout expression when we tell him he's done. Remember how he looked when we rejected his request for veteran hiring initiatives? Their laughter slithered through the wall. Blood rushed to my face. "He actually thought his Navy experience would count for something here," Hamilton added between chuckles. "As if 20 years of building our defense systems warrants anything more than a standard tech salary." "These military guys are all the same," Wade said. "Duty, honor, country. Great for following orders, terrible for understanding business." More laughter. "Make sure Cameron's ready to lock him out instantly," Hamilton continued. "I want his credentials revoked the second he's out that door. Ray's too smart to leave with any system access." Cameron Price, the 28-year-old consultant they'd brought in to modernize our operations. Kid barely knew the difference between authentication and authorization, but he had an MBA and spoke the corporate language these executives loved. "What about the systems?" Wade asked. "Who's going to maintain them?" "Cameron says he can handle it for triple Ray's salary. Worth it if it means we can finally operate without some Boy Scout looking over our shoulders." My hands started shaking. I bit down until I tasted copper. 20 years watching them take credit for my innovations while systematically cutting costs wherever they could. 20 years building something that had grown too valuable, too essential, while remaining too old, too military, too ethical to be properly rewarded. What they didn't understand about the elegant system connecting their 12 manufacturing facilities was simple. It relied on a proprietary authentication protocol I'd designed from scratch during my second tour in the Persian Gulf. Every 72 hours, it required my unique digital signature or the system would revert to baseline state, a safeguard I'd implemented after they blamed me for their last accounting adjustment that nearly wiped out 3 days of production data. A protective measure they'd mocked as paranoid and excessive. A measure that had saved their entire operation 3 times already, including during that ransomware attack 2 years ago, that would have shut down every facility if not for my compartmentalized security architecture. I closed my laptop quietly, gathering my things as their conversation shifted to weekend plans and stock options. These men had no idea what they'd just done. No idea at all. Growing up as a Navy brat, moving from base to base, I'd learned early that systems were only as strong as the people who built them. My father, a career submarine engineer, taught me that redundancy wasn't just good practice. It was survival. When I enlisted at 18, those lessons served me well in the cramped electronic warfare compartments of destroyers and cruisers. 8 years of active duty, from sonar technician to cybersecurity specialist, watching how real leaders operated under pressure. Officers who earned respect through competence, not corporate politics. Men and women who understood that mission success depended on taking care of your people, not exploiting them. When I transitioned to civilian life at 28, Apex was struggling. A small defense contractor barely keeping government contracts, hemorrhaging money through inefficient systems cobbled together by the lowest bidders. I saw potential where others saw problems. More importantly, I saw an opportunity to apply military precision to civilian operations. The early years were good. The founder, Colonel James Patterson, was a straight-talking Marine who valued results over presentations. Under his leadership, I rebuilt their entire digital infrastructure from the ground up. We landed bigger contracts, revenue grew steadily, employees felt pride in their work. Then Patterson retired and sold to a private equity group. That's when Bryce Hamilton arrived. Fresh MBA, family money, and absolutely no understanding of what actually made the company valuable. Within 6 months, he'd replaced half the senior management with consultants and cost-cutters who saw employees as line items rather than assets. The culture changed overnight. Military veterans who'd built the company's reputation found themselves pushed aside by young executives who confused activity with achievement. Quarterly profits became more important than contract quality. Employee benefits got cut while executive bonuses increased. But the system still needed someone who understood them, someone who could keep the lights on while the new leadership figured out how to extract maximum value before moving on to their next acquisition. Wednesday morning brought unusual attention. Vincent Gray, our operations manager, hovered near my workstation as I reviewed system logs. Vincent was one of the few decent managers left from the Patterson era, a former Army logistics officer who actually understood how things worked. "Making progress on that security update?" he asked, eyes scanning my screen with genuine concern rather than suspicion. "Board wants a status report on your server architecture." "Almost complete," I lied, fingers steady despite my racing heart. Vincent didn't deserve to get caught in the crossfire, but I couldn't risk telling him what I'd overheard. His gaze lingered on my monitor. "We should discuss knowledge transfer soon. You're too integral to operations to have everything locked in your head." "Happy to document whatever you need," I said with a practiced smile. That evening, I returned to an empty building. The security guard, Martinez, nodded as I badged in. Another veteran, Army military police who'd been working nights here for 8 years. Good man who deserved better than watching his employer steal from people like him. I didn't sabotage anything. That would be too obvious, too traceable, and frankly, beneath the standards I'd learned in the Navy. Instead, I created something elegant, a transparent bridge that would activate once my authentication signature went inactive for exactly 71 hours. Not destruction, but revelation. But a pathway that would direct all executive communications straight into Department of Veterans Affairs oversight channels. The beauty was in its simplicity. I'd originally designed the system with multiple fail-safes to prevent unauthorized access, but I'd also built in emergency protocols that would automatically report suspicious financial activity to appropriate federal agencies if the primary security administrator became unavailable. It was basic operational security, the kind of redundancy that kept ships running during wartime. All I had to do was modify the parameters slightly. Instead of waiting 30 days for manual intervention, the system would now activate its emergency protocols after 71 hours of my absence. Every executive email, every recorded phone call, every financial transaction from the past 6 months would be automatically flagged and forwarded to federal investigators. I spent 4 hours that night carefully implementing the changes, using legitimate maintenance windows to mask my activities. The modifications were buried so deep in the authentication code that Cameron Price would never find them, even if he knew what to look for, which he didn't. By 2 a.m., everything was in place. I sat back in my chair, looking around the server room I'd built with my own hands. Rack after rack of equipment I'd personally selected, configured, and maintained. 20 years of my professional life contained in humming metal boxes that would soon tell the truth their owners wanted hidden. Thursday morning brought more suspicion. During lunch, Cameron Price appeared beside my desk with that particular swagger of consultants who'd never actually built anything themselves. "Working late again, old-timer?" he observed, pulling up a chair without being invited. His expensive suit and fresh haircut screamed private school and family connections. "Everything's running smooth," I answered, watching him study my screen for reactions. "Interesting. Access patterns seem different. Data routing has shifted since Monday." He leaned closer, trying to read my code. "Security logs show unusual administrator activity during overnight hours." My pulse quickened. Had he noticed something, or was this just phishing? "Performance optimization," I explained calmly. "Reducing latency between facilities. Standard maintenance procedures." I gestured at my documentation folder. Technical enough to sound legitimate, vague enough to mean nothing to someone who'd learned network security from textbooks instead of submarine warfare exercises. He nodded slowly, but his eyes remained suspicious. Just make sure any changes go through proper approval channels. Mr. Hamilton wants complete visibility into all system modifications. Roger that, I said, using military terminology deliberately. Let him think I was just another old soldier who didn't understand modern business practices. That afternoon, 3 unfamiliar IT specialists arrived from Hamilton's consulting firm. They set up temporary workstations and began what they called a comprehensive security audit. I watched them poke around the network perimeter, running scans and vulnerability assessments that would never penetrate the real architecture. I verified my countdown sequence was undetectable, buried beneath legitimate maintenance protocols and disguised as routine security updates. These consultants were looking for obvious threats: malware, unauthorized access, data theft. They weren't sophisticated enough to recognize a system designed to expose its own operators. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd brought in outside experts to protect against exactly what I was doing, but their corporate mindset prevented them from understanding how a properly designed military system actually worked. In the Navy, we called it defense in depth, multiple layers of security that could function independently if any single layer was compromised. What I'd built wasn't a hack or a virus, it was a feature designed exactly as any responsible security administrator would design it. If the person responsible for protecting sensitive data suddenly disappeared, the system would automatically escalate to higher authorities. The fact that those authorities would discover evidence of criminal activity was simply the natural consequence of trying to hide criminal activity. Friday morning arrived with Hamilton himself stopping by my workspace. I'd been expecting this visit, the final performance before the blade fell. "Heard you've been putting in extra hours," he said, leaning against my desk with forced casualness. Up close, he looked younger than his 35 years. Soft in the way that people who'd never faced real consequences often appeared. "Dedication like yours deserves recognition." "Just doing my job," I replied, meeting his artificial smile with my own. Military bearing had taught me how to maintain composure under pressure, a skill that served me well in corporate boardrooms. That's what I like to hear. Teamwork. Commitment. He glanced around the server room. Amazing what technology can accomplish these days. All this power, all this information, controlled by just a few key people. The threat was subtle but clear. He wanted me to know that he understood my importance while simultaneously reminding me of my vulnerability. Standard intimidation tactics that might work on civilian employees but meant nothing to someone who'd faced down hostile boarding parties in international waters. At 4:15, I watched the executive team assemble in the conference room through the glass walls. At 4:28, I quietly activated an irreversible timer sequence. At 4:30, I entered the boardroom. Gerald Stone began the termination with practiced solemnity. He'd done this before, probably many times since Hamilton took over. Due to organizational restructuring, we must make immediate staffing reductions. I remained silent, denying them the satisfaction of my distress. In the Navy, we learned that emotional reactions under pressure were luxury you couldn't afford when lives depended on your decisions. "Your system credentials," Vincent demanded, sliding a form across the table. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He knew this was wrong, but he had his own family to think about. "We need everything. Now." I surrendered my primary passwords, filling out the forms with deliberate care, but I conveniently forgot to mention the authentication signature that maintained their precious system partitioning. That particular security protocol wasn't documented anywhere they could access it. "Any questions?" Hamilton asked, visibly unsettled by my composure. He'd probably expected anger, maybe begging. Instead, he got the same calm professionalism I'd shown during missile drills in the Persian Gulf. "Just one," I replied. "When did you realize I was the only person who truly understood how your systems worked?" Their smug expressions faltered slightly. Cameron Price shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Security walked me out as I counted hours in my head. Not 24, not 48, but exactly 71 hours until my absence triggered the protocol I'd built. I handed over my badge to Martinez at the front desk. He looked genuinely sorry to see me go. "Take care, Chief," he said, using the Navy rank I'd held during my final tour. "This place won't be the same without you." Saturday passed peacefully as I worked on my Harley-Davidson in the garage, letting the familiar routine wash away corporate toxicity. Mechanical work had always cleared my head, reminded me that some problems had straightforward solutions if you understood how the parts fit together. Sunday morning, I turned my phone back on to find 8 missed calls, 12 urgent texts, and 4 increasingly desperate voicemails from the executive team. The first few were professional inquiries about system status. By the 4th message, Hamilton's voice carried unmistakable panic. "Ray, whatever's happening with the systems, we can work this out. Name your terms. Call immediately." Too late. The 71-hour window would close at 3:15 p.m. Monday morning would bring their reckoning. I hadn't leaked data. I hadn't planted false information. I'd simply removed the artificial barriers I'd built, allowing their own communications, their own schemes, their own manipulations to flow directly into federal oversight systems where they belonged. During my years developing the system, I'd discovered the pension fund irregularities gradually. Small discrepancies at first, amounts that could be explained as processing delays or accounting adjustments. But patterns emerged for anyone who knew how to read transaction logs. Large sums would appear in temporary holding accounts, sit there just long enough to generate interest, then disappear into a maze of shell companies before returning to the main pension fund minus a percentage that never quite balanced the books. It was sophisticated enough to fool external auditors, but obvious to anyone with administrator access and military training in financial security protocols. The first time I flagged it, Wade explained it as standard cash flow management. The second time, Vincent suggested I focus on technical issues rather than financial ones. The third time, I documented everything thoroughly and submitted a formal report that disappeared into Hamilton's office and never resurfaced. That's when I knew they weren't incompetent. They were criminal. By Monday's opening, executives would face questioning about the $47 million in diverted veteran pension funds they'd hidden. By noon, operations would halt as their internal messages detailing exactly how they'd falsified contract deliverables flowed directly to the Department of Defense. The system wasn't broken. It was finally working exactly as justice demanded. At 2:30 p.m. Sunday, Wade appeared at my front door, something I never thought possible. "How did you find my address?" I asked, not inviting him in. "Please," he said, desperation replacing his usual arrogance. "The systems are behaving strangely. Authentication failures, weird routing patterns. Cameron can't figure it out." I leaned against the door frame, studying this man who'd spent years dismissing my contributions while pocketing bonuses earned through my work. "That's unfortunate. We'll double your salary, triple it. Just come in and fix whatever's happening. You fired me, remember? Security escort and everything." "A misunderstanding," he insisted, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. Hamilton spoke hastily. "Oak, we need you." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Wade had made his choices over years of systematic exploitation. Now he was facing the consequences. "It's too late," I said simply. His face darkened. "What did you do to our systems?" "Nothing they weren't designed to do." Wade's expression shifted from desperate to threatening. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. There are defense contracts involved, national security implications, people who don't appreciate disruptions." The implied threat was clear. I'd heard similar intimidation tactics from officers who thought rank alone commanded respect. "Are you threatening me?" I asked quietly. He straightened his expensive suit, trying to project authority he didn't possess. "I'm giving you one chance to save your career. Come in now, fix whatever you've done, and we can pretend this never happened." "I'd need full admin access," I said, watching his reaction carefully. Relief flooded his face. "Absolutely. Whatever you need. I'll need time to get ready." "No time," he snapped. "Car's waiting downstairs." I grabbed my keys, deliberately leaving my laptop behind. As we rode down the elevator, Wade made 3 calls telling each person I was cooperating. His confidence was returning, the corporate executive reasserting control over what he saw as a simple personnel problem. The black sedan waiting outside had government plates and a driver who kept checking his mirrors. When we arrived at the office building, Cameron met us at the elevator. "Thank God," he said when he saw me. "The routing tables are rewriting themselves. Authentication protocols are cascading. Everything's going haywire." I nodded professionally. "Show me." The boardroom had transformed into crisis headquarters. Laptops covered the conference table, cables running everywhere. Hamilton paced while barking into his phone. Vincent hovered over 2 IT specialists who looked close to tears. Everyone fell silent when I entered. "Ray," Hamilton said, relief evident. "Thank you for coming. Whatever's happening, we'll make it right." I checked my watch. 3:12 p.m. 3 minutes until the authentication signature required renewal, a deadline they didn't know existed. "Let me see what's happening," I said, sitting at a workstation. They gave me system access. I typed commands slowly, watching diagnostics while executives hovered behind me. The protocols were exactly as I'd designed, counting down to the moment when barriers would dissolve. "Well?" Vincent demanded after 3 minutes of silence. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said calmly. "The system is behaving exactly as designed." "Then why is everything failing?" Cameron asked, peering at my screen with growing desperation. "It's not failing, it's reverting to its natural state." Hamilton pushed forward. "What does that mean? Speak plainly." I checked my watch. 3:14 p.m. "It means in about 1 minute, all internal executive communications will begin routing externally as well as internally." The room went silent. "What communications?" Wade asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. "All of them. Every email, message, and recorded conversation from the executive level for the past 6 months." I stood up from the computer, including discussions about pension fund diversion. Hamilton's face drained of color. "You can't." "I already did," I cut him off. "The authentication protocol required my digital signature every 72 hours. I shortened it to 71 after termination, knowing you wouldn't discover the discrepancy in time." "Stop it," Vincent commanded. "Now." "I can't," I said truthfully. "It's irreversible once initiated, even if I wanted to help, which I don't." Cameron pushed me aside and began typing frantically. "There must be an override." "There isn't," I said. "I designed it that way after you blamed me for your last accounting crisis." Wade grabbed my arm. "Listen to me. Fix this and we'll give you anything. Partnership. Name your salary." I pulled away from his grip. "You should have thought of that before you decided I was disposable." 3:15 p.m. Alarms began blaring from multiple computers. Red warnings flashed across screens. Cameron cursed loudly. "What's happening?" Hamilton demanded. "Authentication failure," Cameron read from his screen. "Protocols reverting to baseline. Partition walls dissolving." "English!" Wade shouted. I answered for him. "It means your secrets aren't secret anymore." The next 4 hours were chaos. IT specialists cycled through increasingly desperate measures while executives pulled me into interrogation after interrogation. None of it mattered. The system now operated as originally designed, without the artificial barriers I'd created to protect their compartmentalized information. By 7 p.m., the first regulatory flags appeared. Automated systems at the Department of Veterans Affairs detected unusual data patterns, the very pension fund movements I'd flagged 3 times. At 8 p.m., Hamilton received a call that drained remaining color from his face. "VA investigators have questions about our pension management," he told the room after hanging up. "They've received concerning information." All eyes turned to me. "I told you," I said calmly. "I didn't leak anything. Your own communications did that." Monday morning arrived with breaking news. Trading halted on the company's stock pending federal investigation. By noon, investigators swarmed the facility. By evening, 6 executives, including Hamilton and Wade, had been escorted out for questioning. I watched from my apartment, fielding calls from VA investigators who wanted my testimony. Each call confirmed what I already knew. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. The executives' own words, preserved in their messages, provided all proof needed. Tuesday brought unexpected visitors, representatives from veteran organizations whose pension funds had been targeted. "They're calling you a hero," said James Rodriguez, a 58-year-old Navy vet who'd worked maintenance at the company for 15 years. "You saved our retirements. I hadn't expected this." The human faces of those I'd protected without realizing. It hit harder than anything else, seeing gratitude in the eyes of fellow veterans who'd nearly lost everything. "My wife was terrified," said Martinez, the security guard. 23 years she worked for the county, and these bastards almost stole her pension. You did what we couldn't do ourselves." Wednesday morning, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Raymond Mitchell?" a professional voice asked. "Speaking. Director Helen Parker, VA Financial Crimes Division. We need to discuss your former employer." The government car arrived precisely on time. Director Parker was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd clearly seen her share of corporate corruption. "Mr. Mitchell," she said once we were seated, "you've uncovered one of the largest veteran pension fraud schemes we've seen. We need to understand exactly how you did it." For 3 hours, I walked them through the system architecture, authentication protocols, and how partitioning had been designed. I explained each safeguard and how, when removed, executive communications naturally flowed into oversight channels. "So you didn't technically leak anything?" she clarified. "You simply removed barriers that were hiding information." "Correct. The system reverted to its natural state." She studied me. "Ingenious," which raises questions about potential employment opportunities. "Ma'am, the VA needs people who understand these systems from inside, people who can recognize patterns others miss." She leaned forward. "People with your particular combination of technical skills and moral compass." 3 weeks later, I stood in a federal courtroom watching Hamilton and the remaining executives enter guilty pleas. Their expensive suits had been replaced with subdued attire, their arrogance with defeated expressions. When Hamilton glanced up and saw me watching, something flashed in his eyes, recognition that his downfall had come not from some elaborate sting operation, but from a veteran he'd underestimated. A man he'd dismissed as outdated while planning to steal from thousands of fellow servicemen. The judge's sentencing was severe. 12 years for Hamilton, slightly less for others, complete financial restitution, and forfeiture of personal assets. "This court views these crimes with particular gravity," the judge stated. "The defendants betrayed sacred trust, stealing from those who served our nation." As Hamilton was led away in handcuffs, he stopped beside me. "You've destroyed everything," he said quietly. I met his gaze steadily. "No, you did that yourself. I just removed the barriers that hid it." 6 months later, I found myself back at Apex Defense Solutions, now under new management with VA oversight. Vincent Gray had been promoted to CEO after investigators confirmed he'd been unaware of the fraud. The first decision he made was offering me my old position back with full authority over security protocols. But I had a better offer. Director Parker's job opportunity had evolved into something more meaningful, heading a new task force specifically designed to protect veteran benefits from corporate exploitation. My first assignment involved reviewing pension fund security at 47 defense contractors nationwide. The system I'd built now serves its true purpose, protecting veterans' financial security rather than facilitating corporate theft. In my new office, I keep one memento from my previous job, a framed photo from my Navy days, reminding me that some principles are worth fighting for regardless of the cost. If you've ever been pushed aside by those who thought their position made them untouchable, remember this: the most dangerous person in any room isn't the one with the most authority. It's the one with the most integrity and the patience to let justice work exactly as it was designed. Corporate loyalty flows upward until it hits a paywall, but military honor flows in all directions because it's not about profit. It's about protecting the people who can't protect themselves.